The One Piece manga just dropped an absolute banger because for the very first time ever, we saw the full devil fruit transformation of one of the legendary 5 Gorosei. And let me just tell you that this was shocking in more ways than just one, because not only does Saint Saturn here appear to be some sort of demon bull from Japanese mythology, but we also saw some truly mind-blowing magical demonic abilities that honestly, in some parts at least, have no logical explanation for. But it doesn't really mean that we won't be trying to dig deep into speculation later on, but that's not all that this chapter revealed, of course, because it also appears that Bonney and Saint Saturn have major beef to settle, because when she came face to face with him, she lost her mind and straight up stabbed the Gorosei in the chest. Like, damn girl. Bonney here is not messing around, and she also would be a cool addition to the crew. But on top of all that, Luffy and Kizaru, of course, also continued their epic brawl, with Luffy even busting out some new Gear 5 techniques that we haven't seen before, but even that is still not enough to bring down Kizaru, because the Admiral got away from Luffy once again and nearly wiped out the main Stella Vegapunk. And honestly, I'm starting to sweat a little bit about how this is actually all going to go, because when Luffy now ran out of time for Gear 5 at the end of this chapter, that now really puts the Straw Hats and the rest of his allies in a truly terrible situation. Before we get to anything else, we of course do have to talk about Saint Saturn and the chaos that we witnessed in this chapter. Because if I'm being completely honest, I'm still trying to really wrap my head fully around what we just saw here, but I will try my best to explain everything that we know for a fact and can at least guess or assume about Saint Saturn's abilities. And first of all, we of course have this incredible magical demonic circle with a 5-pointed star suddenly appearing in the middle of the island, and then right after this, Saint Saturn makes his first moves on the island. Now, before we get to the man himself here, I guess, we have to discuss this diagram because of the massive clues that it might give us about Saturn and even the other Gorosei as well. Now, first off, we don't actually know if Saturn himself created this magic circle or if the circle was somehow necessary for Saturn to make his transformation, which we'll discuss in full detail in just a moment. I mean, the easy thing to say here is that Saturn's powers made the circle appear, but I also wonder if maybe someone like the world's secret ruler Imu actually created the circle that then allowed Saturn to transform. Really, it isn't that wildly impossible, since back in chapter 1085, when we first saw the silhouettes of the Gorosei transformation as well, Imu was also present there and using their mysterious powers before the Gorosei actually transformed. However, just as important as who made this circle is what it can tell us about Saturn's powers. Now, this circle and the 5-pointed star symbol is called a pentagram or pentacle, and let me tell you, it is a massive rabbit hole of religious and cultic symbolism, which I already dove headfirst into so that you don't have to. You're welcome, by the way. But interestingly enough, this symbol has many different meanings across different cultures that you might not even be aware of. Of course, recent pop culture has basically associated an upside down 5-pointed star with things like devil worship and the occult. But if you go further back in history, there's actually a lot more to discover about this sacred symbol. For example, in some religious or historical systems, the 5-pointed star actually represents harmony with nature and the universe as part of sacred geometry. And it was even used in the Christian church to represent good deeds and charity. But maybe the most interesting connection, and the one that makes the most sense for One Piece, is the star's association with 5, let's call it the 5 elements, those being of course earth, air, water, spirits, and fire. Now, why is this important? Well, for one, this magic circle and star appeared alongside with an explosion of black lightning and fire, which I'll connect to Saint Saturn more specifically in just a moment. But first, before we even get to see the transformed world noble in the first place, we get this super creepy warning that anyone below the rank of Rear Admiral is absolutely forbidden from looking at Saint Saturn and his transformation. And honestly, when I first read this, I was kind of thinking, what? This is like this super unnecessary, over-the-top kind of like, I'm a world noble, unnecessarily specific command. So surely if someone looked, they would maybe just get demoted exploded or something, right? But no, we got this instead. Like, this poor dude just looked at the man and his head literally exploded. Like, what? Like, my jaw still dropping, I feel. I mean, if I can be honest, this kind of felt like some sort of like cursed energy technique from something like 𝙻𝚎𝚐𝚐𝚗𝚍, not a devil fruit power from One Piece. Seriously though, this just brings up a ton of questions here. Like, was this truly an unbreakable spell caused by the magic circle, or was it some sort of power that Saint Saturn can use based on the commands that he gives? And what about the Straw Hats and their allies? Will they be affected by those rules? Because you might be able to argue that someone like Usopp or Nami is maybe weaker than a Rear Admiral. I mean, man, please Oda, don't do anything like that to me. But it also makes me wonder why it is specifically Rare Admirals and above that aren't affected. Is it because they have some mastery of Haki there, or is there some other specific reason? Like, I don't know, man. For now, that's enough about evil curses and magical diagrams. Let's get straight to the man himself. And wow, I was really shocked when I saw his full giant form here. And that's because when we first saw the silhouettes in chapter 1085, he had horns, so I originally thought he might have some sort of Minotaurus-like mythical zone fruit, but clearly not. Instead, his appearance is very similar to the Japanese yokai called Ushi-Oni, which literally is just a demon cow or demon bull. And so what do we know about these types of mythical creatures? Well, for one, they're super creepy with their spider-like lower bodies and bull horns. Kind of reminds me of Black Maria from Kaido's crew actually, but other than that, there's honestly not that much that we kind of know about these creatures. Japanese mythology states that they were incredibly vicious and would attack and eat humans anytime that they could. And while they don't appear to have any specific special abilities, they usually lived near water and would even sometimes work with other yokai like the serpent women in order to capture more prey / humans. And strangely enough, that seems to be about it that we get from mythology, but there's actually one other super important detail that we must absolutely discuss here. And so let's actually jump back to the actual view that we get of Saturn here, because he also has this mysterious flame-shaped pattern on his lower spider body, which brings us back to the 5 elemental abilities that we mentioned earlier that might be connected to the 5 elder stars and the 5-pointed star right here. Because like we said, the star appeared with a burst of fire, so it does make me wonder if Saturn can also use fire-based abilities alongside his spider bull transformation, which honestly would also make sense with the Marine's head exploding earlier, because out of all those 5 elements, fire would seem to be the most likely to cause that type of damage. And so, wow, I mean, on top of already having Kizaru and his light abilities, the Straw Hats may now also be dealing with a rampaging, fire-using spider bull. Like, I definitely would not want to be on that island right now. But on top of potential firepower, Saint Saturn has clearly also awakened his zone devil fruit. If it is a devil fruit, maybe it's just a literal devil. I mean, that might be a possibility. But it's at least hinted at by the cloud scarf that we now know very well, because this is the same indicator for awakened zones that we've already seen with Luffy's Gear 5, as well as with the 2 secret agents from earlier in the arc. And now, beyond his powers, the magical star also appeared with the number 5, which makes me wonder if there's a ranking or order system to the Gorosei themselves. And if that's the case, then it makes sense for Saturn to be the 5th in ranking. But does that mean that he's the weakest or the most powerful? Like, I mean, who knows at this point? I'm really just trying to figure out what happened to that poor dude's head. And I'd say that this is honestly maybe the very first time that I'm actually feeling actual legit danger for the Straw Hat crew in a very, very long time, reminding me back of when things went super sideways on Sabaody. And also one more thing about the 5-pointed star and the 5 elements, like if you remember my chapter review way back of when we first got to see Saint Saturn and what his name was and all the names of the other Gorosei, you will know that all of their like different planets that they refer to also correspond 1-to-1 to elements. But yeah, I mean, this is just some super weird stuff happening right now, but what's not weird is you subscribing to the channel for even more One Piece content just like this. However, all that weirdness and danger clearly didn't stop Bonnie from just straight up stabbing Saint Saturn in the chest at the end of this chapter because of some sort of triggered memory that she had about her father's transformation into a cyborg. And And so clearly there seems to have been some major conflict brewing between these two, but this scene also clearly shows us that he can actually be damaged, although honestly I wouldn't be surprised at all if he just brushes off this attack like it was nothing and then heals the damage in the very next chapter. We'll see. Now, you might be thinking that's all that we learned about the Gorosei from this chapter, but actually let's take all of this that we learned about Saturn and try to apply it to the rest of the Gorosei. Because if we're sticking with this theme of 5 elements, which of course could be wrong, but it does seem like a fairly decent theory at this point at least, then what abilities might the other 4 have? Well, just going off the clearest images that we got from chapter 1085, we have some sort of idea what the other zone transformations could look like. And when we compare it to how they were standing earlier in that chapter, we can say that 𝚬𝚎𝚐𝚕 on the far right looks like some sort of animal with a large tusk or horn, which could be an elephant or rhino type transformation, and to me that fits pretty well with an earth type ability. But to be fair, Saturn in Japanese has the kanji for earth, so maybe he is the earth guy. We'll find out. Right next to him is Saint Mars, who looks like some sort of bird, which goes pretty perfectly with air powers. And looking around, we have the most human looking transformation, which is Saint Nazujuro, and honestly I'm not too sure if he could represent water or spirit here, and the same could be said for Saint Jupiter, who just looks like a blob with a large open mouth. So not exactly clear about those two, but maybe the most disappointing part about all of this is that we still can't clearly pinpoint down exactly what their actual devil fruit transformations will be like their full transformation. I mean, we already thought that they would probably be some sort of mythical zones, and now we know that they might all be based on Japanese mythology, but which ones exactly? Well, still a little bit too hard to guess for now, I think. But with this very first hint of the Gorosei's mind-bending powers and possible connection to demons themselves, or devils I guess, like transcending devil fruits themselves, we finally know how the world government might have stayed in power for centuries. Which honestly, with all these different factions, Marines, the nobles, the reverie and everything, the Gorosei, Kong, I mean, yeah. If you want a complete explanation and breakdown of the entire world government system, as well as all, and I do mean all, of the incredible military forces that they command, you can watch that video right here. Thanks for watching.